All right, Metal Summoners, it is an absolute pleasure to be with you guys as always here on our Metal Summit Wednesday. We really appreciate all the love and support you give the show, all of the love and support that you give the artists that Angel and I have the pleasure to interview and talk with. And this is absolutely, of course, no exception. So thank you all to all of you beloved Metal Summoners for all the courtesies that you've always extended. Myself, Angel, and our background guy, Steve, for allowing us to continue on with the show, to do great things. We're back on your island of misfit toys. We're having a nice little evening interview with you guys today, and we really, really appreciate our guest time to have a little bit of fun with us. First and foremost, thank you so much, John, for being on the show. From Danzig, from Sam Hain, from his own solo music with albums like Flesh Caffeine, we are being joined by John Christ. First and foremost, John, thank you for some of your time this evening. We really appreciate you, and welcome to the Metal Summit.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And Angel, are you driving? Are you in traffic right now? Where are you?
Oh, I'm at a parking lot.
He's at a parking lot.
Yeah.
All right. Waiting to go into a concert, I hope?
I did Saturday, but...
All right. Well, modern technology is amazing. Anyway, I appreciate the interest, and you know, it's nice to see you guys out there again, and it's nice to be here right before Halloween. I just got a message yesterday from Erie Vaughn. He's in the south, and the weather's starting to cool. The leaves on the trees are starting to change color, so it's our favorite time of year coming up on Samhain. You know, I'm, what is it? Waiting on the Samhain of my soul.
Yes,
as the lyrics go.
Absolutely. No, we're fans of Erie as well. We got to meet him actually not that long ago in Nashville when Angel and I went up there for the Rockin' Pod Expo. He was one of the featured guests. We weren't able to score him for an interview. He was actually penciled in to actually be our first interview this month, but we weren't able to kind of like sync it up with like with like working it through like Messenger and a tech request of his. But we're definitely going to have Erie on in the future because he's always been great, and he showed some love to your announcement as well too when we put out that you would be on the show. So you know, Erie's always been great to us. You know, you've always been great to me, John. We've met a few times over the years. Yep. And again, thank you so much for your courtesies.
It's my pleasure. I'm never sure where you're going to show up. Yeah, I can't remember. Were you at the Salem show last year? And
I wasn't at the Salem show, but the last couple of times that you and I crossed paths was at Falston Barrel House. You were playing with your band, and you were playing.
That was a benefit show.
Yeah. That was the benefit show, and then also at and then not long before that, you were at Dave's shop, Vintage Vinyl, for a show.
Vintage Vinyl. Oh, that was a signing up in Bel Air, Maryland. That's right.
Yeah.
That place is long gone now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was really, really sad to see that. I was actually going over there with my wife, and because Dave's always been great to us, and we don't really know the details of what exactly happened with that situation, but it was kind of a bummer. We kind of showed in, kind of walked in the door, and as employees had been working on packing things up, and we were just kind of like, oh, sorry. So we just kind of, stepped aside, and so that was a little bit of a bummer. But the first time that I ever got to meet you, you actually made an appearance because I know that you and Ace Von Johnson have a really strong relationship. But you came on stage at Fishhead Cantina for a Faster Pussycat show like a while ago.
That was years ago. I remember that. Yeah, Ace will hit me up whenever he's coming through town, either with Faster Pussycat or LA Guns, or whatever he happens to be doing, and I will go and say hello to my old road cases and my old Marshalls.
Right, absolutely, because I know that he does have those and protect those with his life.
Yeah, he got some good stuff. So Ace is a good guy. Ace is a good guy.
Absolutely.
All those guys are. I mean, I know some of those guys from Hollywood back in the day, you know.
Mhm. No,
Back in
absolutely.
my day when we walked uphill in the snow both ways to school, you know, long before you guys were born.
Absolutely. Oh, come on, John. You know you were only a senior when I was a freshman.
Oh, I don't know that for certain.
No, of course, there, my friend. But one of the first things I wanted to ask about is you actually just recently did a series of shows. You played Metro at in Baltimore as part of that. But yeah, you just did a series of John Christ shows. So I'd love to hear, how those went for you.
So yeah, I've been doing a few here and there. Erie, as a matter of fact, was one that got me started doing some of the horror cons. And let's see, there are a couple of guys from the South that contacted me to do the Vet City Con in Bowling Green. And have you heard of that one? I'm not
I
sure.
did. I
Okay.
have heard of that one. Yeah.
And the promoter for that, Chad, put together a little band for me. And we did like Knoxville, Birmingham, and one other place. I don't know, it was like 3 or 4 shows down there just for fun, just to see what kind of interest there was. And it turned out really well. Played with some guys that I'd never met before, but they were longtime fans and they knew Erie. So I was like, okay, let's see what, I called it the Southern Experiment, just to see what happened, and it was like punk rock all the way, but it worked out pretty well. And then did a couple more cons like Mad Monster and Days of the Dead. And they were fun. I mean, I got to meet some beautiful starlets. The gal, what was the gal from Nev Campbell was next to me at one of them.
Oh, wow.
And the girl from American Pie, the Swedish girl from the famous bedroom scene.
Shannon Elizabeth.
Shannon Elizabeth, I met her at another one, and there were so many people. I met some guys from the old Rocky movies, so I had a great time. I mean, I was fanboying out all over the place, meeting all these famous people. And Erie and I did Horror Hound last year in Cincinnati, and a couple of guys from the Southern Experiment, Snakes of Christ, came up and we played, and so it was fun. I was trying to bring some music in instead of just a convention where you're just taking pictures, selfies, and signing autographs,
For sure.
Last November, my sisters live out in Chicago, and there was a Days of the Dead, and Alice Cooper was there. So I got to meet him and got to play a little set out there. And so sometimes I would do it with a full band and do some of the old stuff, and other times I do acoustic guitar and tell stories, and play the stuff on acoustic nobody's ever heard. Devil's Plaything and Her Black Wings and End of Time and all these old songs, even Twisted Cane and Mother on acoustic guitar. So there was a lot of novelty in it, and I started the Acoustic Confessions of Christ in my hometown in March in Catonsville. So I had a bunch of family and friends and told the whole story about how the chance meetings with Sam Hain drummer London May and led to a couple auditions in New York with Rick Rubin, and then meeting Glenn and Erie and all that. And then it just, things started to happen. And it's amazing because that was, I want to say that was like 86, 87. Mm-hmm. And the first Danzig record came out 88. So, it's a lot of water's flown under that bridge, if you know what I'm saying. So, yeah. And I just got the itch to get out and play, doing the conventions, the cons, as they say. I didn't think there was much interest. I thought that people knew Mother, but they didn't really care about much of the rest of the Danzig music. And he was like, you know what? There are more fans out there than you think. You should go do a couple conventions. So I did, and the fans are like, we've been here. You're the one that left. We've been waiting. And I had a near comeback with the Flesh Caffeine thing, but then the group that I put together fell apart the week before the show. Classic Hollywood story. And it was one of those where managers say never spend your own money on an album and a project and blah 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 blah. And I ended up doing that, and it ended up with a good product, but then I didn't have a band that could go out and support it. So things just kind of faded away for a while. But and then a whole decade or more passed, and we got older, and my parents got older, and I came back to see them, and they were moving into retirement communities and selling the old house, and friends from my childhood 50, 60 years ago started dropping like flies. And I'm like, wow, I want to keep talking to people and playing as much as I can while I can. And I've been teaching music. I was at Peabody in Baltimore, which is mostly classical music, but they started a little rock and roll program, and I kept that going until COVID kind of killed everything for a couple of years. Yeah. And I'm still teaching at a community college just down the street. So it's low stress, it's local. I can act like a geezer teacher if I want, or I can act like a spoiled rock star if I want. And it's a small enough pond. So nothing great's going to happen, but nothing super is going to happen. But there's some good kids that come through there. And I'll have my students at the end of the semester go, my dad would love an autograph. And last year was the first time I got my grandmother wants an autograph. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. You're killing me, Smalls.
Oh, man.
I said, don't think this is going to improve your grade. If you had asked for an autograph for the first session, then maybe I would have, given you a better grade.
You can't use that as leverage at finals time.
No, and what's funny is I'm teaching a history of rock and roll class now, and there's one older guy that's retired, and he's familiar with all the music. The other kids, they have no clue who Danzig is, what Danzig was, nothing. But one of them is a guitar player, and he's like a big Extreme fan. So I started putting a couple of threads out there. He's figured it out, and now I gave my first exam yesterday, and when the kids came in, I was playing live Danzig videos from 1994 and 95, and a couple of different songs like Brand New God, and there was Mother, and I think Long Way Back from Hell. There's something else going on. And I said, pay attention to these videos because there might be some exam questions at the end of the test. And they just, they're very clever, the younger kids, but they grew up a completely different way. They went through high school during COVID, and it's just their world. It's just changed it, completely. We survived it. We complained about the masks and the shutdowns and all that kind of stuff, but they were just teenagers. So teaching them now is like they're kind of shifted to the left a little bit, and you've got to explain things a certain way, and they're pretty sensitive. So, you can't yell at anybody, you can't smack anybody, you can't insult anybody. You can't even tell them they need to study more, because people will complain about anything. But that's academia. It is what it is. But the fact that I'm teaching rock and roll, and I've got guitar students and bass students and banjo students and mandolin students. So I'm teaching anything with strings on it. And so it's almost like a hobby that I get paid a little bit of money for, and but not good money. But that money pretty much pays for the food for the horse and the dog and, and a little extra for me. So people started saying, hey, why don't you go out and do some shows? So I started doing a couple of shows here and there, and the responses have been great, but I think the bulk of the fans don't even know that I'm still alive. You know what I mean? I kind of was off the grid for almost 20 years, and it takes a little while to get back on unless you come up with a viral video.
Yeah.
So, people come to the shows and they'll post something on Facebook here and there. I mean, I have Instagram and I'll put things up occasionally, but it hasn't been like a full-time pursuit.
Yeah.
I just got an offer to go over to Europe and maybe do some festivals in the spring. So we'll see if the Apostles are available.
Absolutely.
I only need 4 of them. I mean, I don't have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but
right.
I got a Tony.
You got a Tony?
I got a Tony, so I got a good head start there. There was a great joke. We did Hell's Heroes down in Houston in March. And there were a lot of people on the bill, a lot of these, dark metal bands and speed metal bands and all that kind of stuff. And I wasn't sure what to expect. And I went down there, and Chris Green, who is a tour manager for a bunch of different bands, I met him with Days of the Dead. He'd been in a tribute band. He's like, hey, why don't you come do Hell's Heroes and blah, blah, blah. I was like, sure. And I said, you got a band? He said, I'll find some guys. And he found, one guy that I had done some work with in Chicago, and I played with Chris once. And the drummer was playing in another band, but he had toured with Danzig. I think it was like Warrior Soul or some other band as a drummer. So I hadn't seen him since like 92 or 93. And we didn't rehearse. I saw him on stage. We plugged in, we line checked, and we went. It was crazy. Only expecting a few hundred people. Well, the set that was outside on the main stage, they went off and everybody came over to our show, and we had like 3,000 people, and it was amazing. There were mosh pits. People were crowd surfing. My wife's niece and boyfriend were there, and I saw them after, and they could barely get in because the place was like sold out. So It was nice. It was like the old days. It was like 93 all over again. And I looked out at the audience and I said, I'm the only original guy here. I guess Glenn, Erie, and Chuck are still at the hotel. I told them to come down. I said, I invite them every time I play, but they just haven't showed up. So I keep inviting them, But so now it's for fun. And I had a lot of young guitar players come up after the show and say, hey, Danzig was a big influence along with Slayer and Metallica and Megadeth and all that. And just to be included in that group, of young guys that are now doing their own albums and their own tours. And, it was an honor, a privilege. And I didn't expect to hear that, and it was really, really nice to hear that from the fans after all this time. And again, they said, those first 4 records were like anthems for them. And going through high school and college, it was in heavy rotation at all their parties and everything. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I heard it more than once. So I said, okay, maybe there's something to that. And so life has been flying by incredibly fast, getting faster. Every year, it seems like 3 years go by now instead of 1. And I'm trying to play as often as I can. And teaching for the past, 12, 13 years has really made me quicker. When I hear music now, I can hear stuff once or even half a song and know it. And teaching rock ensembles and stuff at the school. You know, you pick out 15, 20 songs at the beginning of a semester to do a concert at the end that ends up being maybe 8 to 12 songs. So everybody's got to learn all this music, and it's been fun because I've been exposed to music that all these students love that I never would have heard of if I was just sitting in my dungeon practicing and writing my own songs. So what I'm saying is that my musical vocabulary has been expanded immensely. And I've picked up a whole bunch of new tricks and tips that teaching the students and just trying to save them time, you know. So that's been rewarding. And I can customize the way that I corrupt their minds with the evil dissonant sounds of one of the OG demonic headbangers from '88.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. And before I kick it up to Angel, after this question, go ahead and take it away there, my friend. But John, I wanted to take you back real quick to Falston Barrel House, just with the band that you were performing with there, because there was so much just kind of fun songs that you performed during that set. Of course, not only some Danzig tunes as well, but songs that you could also definitely tell were influences on you. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about your influences just musically, as well as what got you into playing guitar in the first place.
So let me roll back. That was Stanstock, which is a yearly benefit for, there are a couple of different charities, but the main one that drew me in was that they raise money for the families of terminally ill children.
Oh, wow.
Right. So all the musicians, they do it like a festival. It's a 2-day festival, and they have 2 stages going. Everybody gets a 55-minute set with a 5-minute changeover. The worst possible setup you could ever imagine, because everybody's using the same drum kit and backline. And if you're not using their equipment, then you're dragging your amp and pedal board and guitars on while the other guys are dragging off their snare drum and kick pedal, and there's no time to do anything. But you're like, well, you know, it's for charity, it's for the kids, right? What Metallica used to say, it's for the kids. So and when I was I'd done it once before the previous year with a group called the Black Light Orchestra, and they're a progressive group. And what attracted me was I just jumped in on their gig. I said, hey, you guys, you know, would you like to have another guitar player to do your show? And you're like, well, why? And I said, well, you guys do Edgar Winter's Frankenstein. You know, they were doing Burn by Deep Purple. They were doing some other songs by Yes, you know, not Roundabout, but a couple other things, some stuff. So all this progressive rock stuff. And I said, when am I ever going to get a chance to play Frankenstein live on stage? You know, never.
Sure.
And I said, this could be it. So went and did it. And then they asked me if I wanted to come back and do my own show. And as a joke, I was like, sure. And they said, well, what name are you going to go under? And I said, let's go with Taller Than Danzig.
Yeah.
And they're like, are you serious? And I said, I'm deadly serious.
Yep.
And what's funny is one of the lead singers, Vicky, you know, she was short, and she said, well, I'm going to have to wear extra, you know, 5-6-inch heel pumps just to make sure I'm still taller than Danzig. I said, 3-inch heels, you'll be fine. And so, but the other interesting about that show, and we'll get to the influences, is that the drummer played for, who did he play for? I think it was Trickster. And let's see, Gene Barnett.
Gene Barnett, Dirty Looks.
Dirty Looks, that's right. I'm sorry, Dirty Looks. Sorry, Gene. Sorry. He played with Dirty Looks. I met him when he was 15 years old in his basement, and a couple of my buddies were thinking about bringing him into their band. So I went to check him out and everything. So I'd known him since he was a kid. We dated the same girl Not at the same time, but it was a small town, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And one of the bands I was in when I was 15, a couple of the people were still around. So I just made a couple of calls, and we got a bass player that I used to play with from time to time. And then the keyboard player and the singer were been the first band I was in called Blind Ambition. And Blind Ambition, we played keg parties. We played college keg parties, sorority parties. We played at local pools in the summertime. We played for parades on flatbed trucks. You name it, we did it. And a couple of them had been jamming together. So I was like, well, why don't we get together and jam and see what happens? And, it's for charity. And so we ended up doing, what were we doing? Were we doing like Barracuda? We were doing Adele.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did a lot. Like, yeah, you did. You did Heart. Adele.
We did Heart. We did Adele. We did the Beatles. We did Tom Petty.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing all kinds of stuff. We did Mother. So I was just like, yeah, let's mix it up. We had a keyboard player, and we had three of us that could sing harmony vocals. So I was just like, it's only an hour, it's for charity. Let's just have some fun and go out there and do some different stuff. And that's, and just the title of the group was enough to make it happen for me. And then last year I couldn't do it because I got sick, but it was great to play with those folks. And now they're all playing in bands again. They were semi-retired, and now they're starting to play and join other groups, and they're getting out of their basement and going back into the club. So maybe I had something to do with it, but I don't know. It was a real good time. So I'm having much more fun playing music now that there's not a dollar amount or percentage with every single note I play.
Nice. Yeah.
Back in the Hollywood days and everything, I did a lot of studio work. I did some movie soundtracks. I played on some TV shows and live house bands. I got to back up Lou Rawls. You'll never find that. And God, I forgot the other guy. He did Too Hard to Handle. He's the Dutch guy with the curly hair.
Tom Jones?
Tom Jones. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tom Jones. So he was doing a version of the original Too Hard to Handle, and I was playing the Black Crowes version.
Oh.
So at rehearsal, I broke into the guitar solo early, and he stopped and was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Son. You with the black hair and the funny looking guitar. What are you doing? I said, Tom, I was cutting to the solo. He's like, no, that's not the arrangement. Sorry, Tom, won't happen again. And so we got to do 2 shows together, and that was amazing to have on the resume. And of course, I met Ozzy on my last U.S. Danzig tour. I interviewed him for Rip Magazine, and he was actually the one that told me to quit the band.
Oh, wow.
He said, you got to get out of there. And he told me a lot of reasons why. And we did the interview really quickly, and I was expecting just an hour and a half, and then, okay, nice, see you. But he was like, hey, I got nothing going on, John. You want to hang out a bit? And I was like, oh, man, yeah, man. It's like, so what's going on with Danzig, I've heard some things about your singing, but at the end of the day, mate, you got to be fucking happy. You know what I'm saying? And he was right. He was a cool guy. I knew Zach from LA. We were neighbors out there, so I would see him and the kids once in a while. And at the time I met Ozzy, they had just hired Joe Holmes. Remember Joe Holmes? He did okay. So that story is just that Ozzy was trying to reach Zach, and I guess Zach was doing Pride and Glory or whatever. And he just wasn't getting back to them because they needed deadlines so they could set up tours and shows and all that kind of stuff. I was like, I missed another opportunity. I was like, Ozzy, if I'd known this, I would have contacted you 6 months ago. But anyway, but that was wonderful to meet him. And when we toured with Black Sabbath, Ronnie James Dio was singing. And so I got to hang out a little bit with him and Geezer backstage. And I would see Tony Iommi at NAMM shows and whatnot, so it was just a nod. And he laughed when I call him Uncle Tony. Because I say, Tony, I'd say you're young, but you're old enough to be my dad. And my mom was a nurse, and I know you guys came through the East Coast back in the 60s. I'm just saying, I know you're not a saint, but I don't think my mom was either. So there's a chance, Dad. I say I'm left-handed. We have the same birthday, right? I share a birthday with Tony Iommi. We're both left-handed. He plays left-handed. I play right-handed because my parents didn't want to pay the extra expense to get left-handed instruments for me. So,
oh wow,
I had to learn to write right-handed, and I had to learn to throw and catch and everything right-handed. And I did that for years. And eventually, when I got a little bit older, my rebellious years, I switched back.
Nice.
But it was, you're going to play Little League Baseball and you've got a right-handed glove, and I'm always taking it off and throwing with the same hand. Anyway, but those influences we were talking about, they went way back to the early days. And musical family, they were always active in neighborhood community musical plays. And there were some church groups, and they put on these benefits where there would be a play like Oklahoma or Mame or Brigadoon or all these, old classics, South Pacific. And I was just a little rugrat running around, and my dad would either be acting in it, or he was a trumpet player and a singer. So he would be in the orchestras, and they would put the kids in the chorus and give us a line or two and run around. So I've been on stage for 50 years, So it's hard to believe I've been at it for 50 years. And I'm just starting to feel like I know something after all that time. And my wife is like, why do you still practice so much? And I said, there was a great violinist and cellist. I think Isak Perlman was the violinist, and he was getting up there in age. And they said, why do you still practice so much? And he said, because lately I'm noticing some improvement.
Nice.
And I'm all about leveling it up.
Yeah.
People ask me to come out and jam, and I like to jump into a jam situation with a band. Somebody throws a guitar, like I go see Ace Van Johnson, Von Johnson, Ace. It's just Ace. I go to see Ace, and somebody will hand me a guitar, and it's down to my knees. I can't even reach the strings. The guitar player is like a 6'2" guy, and so I got to go over to the monitor and throw this skull guitar on my knee just so I can, play Mother, and it's drop tuned to like, Z flat or something. And you just kind of fake it till you make it and have fun. But I like to always then, in the middle of a song, I'll shift to another song and see if they know it, see if the band can keep up. And usually just for a few seconds, and then I'll go back to something everybody knows. And it's just, it's fun when you jump up with another group that's used to doing a certain thing, and you challenge them, they challenge you a little bit. The audience gets excited because they see the band get excited. Yeah. And then everybody gets engaged, and they can feel it, and they want to see what's going to happen next. And when you're a witness to that, and you see good musicians listening to each other, communicating non-verbally, just with music and eye contact and stuff, it's addicting. It's like a miracle. And that's what I like to do now. I mean, it'd be nice to get back on a tour somewhere and do that, but it's kind of, Glenn's had my number for 30 years. How do I know this? Because his attorneys contact me a couple of times a year, to tell me stop doing this, that, or the other thing. So I know he knows where I am. But as far as getting any calls for any reunions or something, I doubt that's ever going to happen, which is a shame for the fans. And, I love the guy for his creativity and his intensity and what we did together. Mm-hmm. Same for Chuck and Erie and Rick Rubin in those early days. And if it hadn't also been a business, things probably would have been fine.
Right.
So I only wish the best for all those guys. And we were very fortunate to be together at an important time in music. I think back in the times before I was officially in Samhain, and I've met Rick Rubin. I didn't know much about him. I knew the Misfits, but I wasn't a fan. We used to get in fights with the punkers at school, so it was just like, those guys can't even tune their guitars, whatever. But it was a different. My town just wasn't a heavy punk town. If you went east into Baltimore, it was a huge punk scene there, and DC had a great punk scene.
Yeah.
But I was just on the outskirts, so it wasn't really in my orbit. But then when I hooked up with Glenn and Erie and Rick, it was like, well, okay, yep, you can definitely play, but you got to dye your hair black, you got to dye your goatee black, you got to get rid of all your blue jeans and your white Nike tennis shoes with the tongues hanging out, and you got to throw away all that kind of stuff. It's black from now on, black leather boots, no sunshine, got to stay pasty white. And Erie's like, here, a couple of cassette tapes. You got 120 Misfit songs to learn, and we're rehearsing next week. I'm like, okay. And, away we went. But I started to get excited because I would see Run DMC and Aerosmith doing Walk This Way. And then there's Rick Rubin in the video. And then Beastie Boys, You Gotta Fight for Your Right to Party. And then there's Rick Rubin, a couple other guys from Def Jam in the video. And I was like, wow, this is like a real thing. Yeah. I wasn't taking it too seriously at first. And I'm like, I said, that sounds horrible, but it's still cool. And I'm like, well, if that's what people want, I can do that all day long. And all the people we met, I mean, it was the Beastie Boys, it was Run DMC, it was LL Cool J, guys like Ice-T. I didn't meet them till I moved to LA, but they did some shows with us, and moved to Hollywood and bumping into Slash and the Guns N' Roses guys, and it was just like we were neighbors,
Yeah.
And they had their scene. They were like the new Aerosmith, Mm-hmm. And we got fortunate enough that Metallica took us out on our first tour of the UK in '88. And so people had heard of us, but we were kind of like that little dirty secret that your parents and aunts and uncles don't want anybody to know about until you start to get a hit record, and then their grandkids want your autograph. So then they got to call your dad and go, hey, you're in the choir at my church. Could I get your son's autograph? And then all of a sudden it was okay. Mm-hmm. This funny stories like that. But what else you want to know?
No, for sure. Angel, I'm going to let you take it away, but have you and Erie had any conversations about doing anything together, since you seem to have a pretty cordial relationship?
There's always the, hey, we should get together and do something. And then it's like, how's your mom? How's your dad? It doesn't go much beyond that. The last time I spoke to him, he was trying to finish a record. He had a country blues record that I like because he'd written some love songs in there, and I knew a lot of the girls that he was talking about.
Mhm.
You know, I've met him over the years, you know, and it was, I was like, this is really cool. You got to get this out. So I know he was close to finishing, and it was like Eerie Von, kind of creepy Sam Hain voice doing a mock Elvis thing, bluesy, but then he's got vintage lap steel guitars and fiddle players and this like Nashville sound going.
Hmm.
You know, so he's got these Nashville ringers. So the quality of that musicianship is really good. And so he was just, I think, you know, trying to get some funding and finish it up and get it out there. And now I heard he's working on another picture novel, or whatever you want to call that, like the Misery Obscura Part 2 or something.
Yeah.
So he was always taking pictures back in the early days, and that's how he met Glenn. Is he was photographer for the Misfits. And,
right on.
yep. So he and Doyle went to high school together, so they were classmates. And you know, Doyle was a little bit younger than Jerry and Glenn, and so Eerie and Doyle, you know, they go back a long ways back in Lodi, and Eerie's really into photography, and he took some great stuff. And then when we started recording, he brought his camera back out, and we went on tour with Metallica. He took some pictures, and a lot of that stuff ended up in the book. And of course, you know, the only thing I ever hear about are the pictures where my hair was god awful. But I think my hair was god awful for about a year, and that's when all the photo sessions were happening. So, you know, it is what it is. I asked for a body wave. I got a poodle head curly perm that took a year to grow out. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Right on, man. Right to you, Angel.
Yep. All right, Angel, what do you got?
When you moved from Maryland, where Jay's from, to Jersey, where I'm from, what
What
was
exit?
exit 9?
Exit 9. Wait, is that New Brunswick?
Yep.
Okay.
Damn.
I did my time on the turnpike.
Oh, I've done my time on the Turnpike, the Garden State Parkway.
Absolutely. So yeah, I went to Maryland, from Maryland, went to New Jersey. And ironically, while I was in Jersey, a sister of mine and brother-in-law moved to Freehold. And he was finishing up a PhD there, and they had one of my nephews. So I would drive down the parkway from Lodi, Passaic area, and go down to Freehold and read dinosaur stories to my nephew.
Yeah, I'm not far from Freehold. I'm actually at the John Bon Jovi rest stop.
Oh, so you're sitting off of the turnpike right now, are you?
Yep, sitting off the Parkway.
Off the parkway, okay. Have we met yet?
No, but I hope we do.
Have you ever? Did you ever see the original Danzig lineup?
No, because my brother was too much of a pussy to take me to the concert.
Ah, that's a good answer right there. See, that's acceptable.
Oh no, dancing! Like, shut up, you Vanilla Ice listening motherfucker. I'm sorry. I cannot forgive him. I cannot forgive him for not taking me to see Danzig.
Yeah, well, there you go. You know,
Agreed.
and I, you know what? I'll give him just the virtual bitch slap for you. That's right. You've been virtually bitch slapped by Christ.
I'll bitch slap him with the turkey on Thanksgiving.
There you go. Thanksgiving is coming up.
Definitely.
So fire away. Ask me something.
Was the music, when you move up to Jersey, was the music scene different from the way it was in Baltimore?
Absolutely. Because Baltimore, it's a big small town, and Jersey is a half hour from the city. So everything is the city. You know, you're talking about Manhattan, right?
Yep.
So it was like all the bands would play gigs in Jersey to get better so that they could get better gigs in Manhattan. And there weren't, but the thing is, like back in the heyday of LA, there were clubs all over the place, you know, and from Hollywood to downtown LA to Pasadena to northern San Diego County to San Diego County, all the way up towards Ventura and Santa Barbara. So there, I mean, there were just lots of places to play. In Jersey, in each town, you might get one or two, you know, and like Danzig, we would warm up at City Gardens in Trenton. I always called it Trenton City Gardens, but it was just called City Gardens. And it was a low profile gig to get us prepared to headline at the Ritz in Manhattan. And a lot of the Jersey guys that I knew from the gym, their bands, they were trying to play like the Cat Club and the Limelight and stuff like that in New York. And since I was with Sam Hain at the time, it hadn't changed over to Danzig yet. We were talking about some of those same venues, but as soon as Chuck Biscuits got in the band, then the whole thing about changing the name from Sam Hain to Danzig. So two things, so that Glenn would be free from lawsuits, so that none of the old guys could try and bring suit against the new band members and Glenn and all that. At least that's what we were told at the time. So Rick Rubin had a hard sell convincing us that, they wanted to change the name, because Erie and Chuck and I, and even Glenn, we were really getting into the Sam Hain thing, and Erie printed up dozens of t-shirts, and my favorite t-shirt, "No more Mr. Nice Guy on your knees, bitch." We had all this great stuff going on at the time, and so it was kind of a shock when we heard about it. And so there was a lot of
Sam Hain.
yeah, exactly. There's a lot of legal wrangling that went behind the scenes, and as the artist in the band, we were kind of on a need-to-know basis about a lot of that stuff. All we wanted to do was get the songs written and get a record recorded, So we would go to places in Passaic and Clifton, Montclair. There's a college up there on the hill. We heard they had some cute college girls up there, so we'd go and see what sort of bands were playing. But the scene was more punk rock, and there were rock bands there. And the difference between Jersey and Baltimore, there's a bigger volume, there's a bigger volume of people. And you had a different energy level, because you go to the top of the nearest hill and you can see Manhattan, and at the time you could see the World Trade Centers, so pretty much any of the freeways, the turnpikes, the parkways, you'd always get vistas of lower Manhattan. And Erie and I like to go in, once a week or once every couple of weeks, and go see bands and stuff, and hang out at the Village. And he showed me around everything. So it was like, man, this place is cool. We could do a lot down there. But there are a lot more rock and roll clubs that we saw in the city. And it was sort of like, didn't seem, except for like CBGBs and stuff, that there wasn't a whole lot of punk rock everywhere in Manhattan in 87, 88. It was there. The clothing was there. The jackets were there. The attire, the attitudes. But there were a lot of rock and rollers going on. And you guys remember 48th Street in Manhattan? Music Row, Sam Ash was there, and a bunch of other music stores. And So the music was kind of changing, you know. Rap was just starting to come in, but it wasn't big. You know, you're just getting a couple of people. There was no hint of grunge or the Seattle scene yet. Speed metal was pretty big. You know, Metallica and Slayer. Megadeth was just starting to get their footing. They weren't a superstar group yet. Flotsam and Jetsam was out there. Yeah, what was the New York? New York had some speed metal bands at the time. Throw some names out at me, guys.
Anthrax.
Yes, Anthrax was a big one.
Anthrax. I mean, they were like Nitro was still kind of glammy, but Michelangelo was such a fast player that I know that they got lumped into the speed metal category a lot.
Yeah, and we would go to Lemore's East over in Brooklyn and see the speed metal bands over there play and everything. And that was a long drive for us, but we tried to see what was going on out there. So yeah, and I've been back to Jersey just to drive by my old apartments just to see if the buildings are still there. And it's just like, man, things are so small. And there are pockets of Jersey that are still, the Italian men still play dominoes in the back room, and they stand out on the corner until 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, just, keeping everybody awake. It's still happening. Mm-hmm. So the facades of the buildings have changed, but there's still a lot of old school thrown together up there, which I'm kind of missed that part of it, Yeah. Seeing the Cadillacs with the Brothers of Italy placards in the back dash. That's Jersey right there.
Yep.
Lodi Pizza. Last time I was in Jersey, I went by Lodi Pizza. I saw one of my old roommates was there, and a photo session and selfies broke out, because the guy that owns the place is friends with the Misfits, and they've got their own like shrine on one of the walls there. Oh, wow. But I just had to go in and get a pie and, hang out a little bit and get some Manhattan specials. You know what Manhattan specials are, Angel?
Nope.
So it's a coffee espresso soda. And they've got extremely high amount of caffeine and an extremely high amount of sugar.
I need that.
And it tastes like espresso. They're amazing. Called Manhattan Specials.
I need that.
And you can't get them down here in Baltimore. So I get my friends up in New York and New Jersey. They brought me cases for my birthday. It was awesome.
Nice.
So I missed the pizza, right? I miss the food. I miss a lot of the culture. I miss being so close to Manhattan. You can just feel it. You know what I mean? You're exit 9, but you're still not that far away,
No, I'm only like about an hour away, and I'm always in that area.
So you're an hour from there, and you're an hour from Philly, right? You're real close to Trenton and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I venture down to see Jay from time to time.
Yes.
There you go. Where are you living now, Jay?
I live in Harford County. I live in Joppa.
In Joppa. See, yeah. I mean, I could tell some stories about Joppa, but I'm sure Jay knows all about it.
Yeah. Now, when because I'm originally from Massachusetts, but I'm I've been living in Maryland for quite a while, and I lived a short time when I moved out on my own in Nottingham, like kind of back behind White Marsh.
Yeah.
For a little while, but all of the time I've lived in Maryland, it's been very like Harford County dominant, with the exception of like Abingdon and Edgewood. I pretty much lived everywhere else. I've lived in Havre de Grace and Aberdeen and Joppa, and
right off Route 1.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he knows we call it Cecil Tucky.
Yes, Cecil Tucky. Yep.
Cecil County, we call Cecil Tucky for a reason. You don't want to break down at night in Cecil Tucky. Anyway, that's another story. But salt of the earth people there.
No, 100% for sure.
So what's up for 2026? I'm trying to get my act together to get out there and do some more shows. A friend of Ace's works at Gibson Guitars, and was trying to do something with Gibson. And he's working on a metal show. He's also working on a Tony Iommi tribute show, and I did some interviews for that. And I still got some old friends and some family in Southern California, so I'd like to get back out there and see them. I got cousins in Vegas, friends in Phoenix. So you see, it's like, okay, if I start the tour from the West Coast, then I just have to fill in some cities. I got family in St. Louis and Chicago, so I need some like Des Moines, Iowa, Minneapolis connections, and kind of wiggle my way back around. And I've also been working, like I've done some clinics and workshops for guitar and for rock and roll music. So if I can work in some educational things at like local colleges, where one day I can show up and I can do a master class early and then do a show at night, and then it's just got to pay the bills to make it worth your while. That's the whole thing. It's like,
Yeah.
not too many people are using tour buses anymore. You know how much a tour bus costs now?
No, but
So they call it the empty fee, meaning without a driver and without fuel, is $35,000 a month.
Damn.
oh my God.
So
That's
drivers get like $2,000 a week plus hotels and per diem, and just imagine what diesel fuel is. So the renter, the artist, is responsible for all those costs, plus insurance and all this kind of stuff. So you got to be putting a lot of butts in seats. You got to fill a lot of rooms to pay for that overhead. So a lot of guys from my era, like the Quiet Riot guys, Johnny Kelly, Typo Negative, he's playing with Quiet Riot, and they jump around, they play in different bands and jump from tour to tour. They're doing like the casino circuits where they'll fly out Sunday night and they'll have a home base somewhere like Vegas or Phoenix or whatever. And they'll rent minivans. Promoters will have the whole back line for them, all the Marshalls and drums. He said, I just bring my pedal and my toolkit for tuning the drums and sticks, and that's it. And, our generation of fans are empty nesters now, so they got a little cash, and they date night. They go to a nice casino. They have dinner. They pay a few $100 for a show. They spend the night. They get up. They have breakfast. Boom. They go home. That's their idea of a weekend. A rock and roll weekend. So, these guys go play 3 or 4 nights and then they fly home. So I'm like, well, there's got to be some, wiggle room somewhere in between. And so I'm working on it.
Absolutely, for sure. John, I wanted to ask you kind of a fun question for a story for you to tell. When I was at one of your shows, I believe it was at Dave's show at Vintage Vinyl, you were talking to some fans, and I was standing there as well. But you were telling a story about the flame boots that you wear and how you got those. And I was hoping you might tell that story again because I just thought it was so fun.
Okay, so jump in if I forget anything, but it was, I was living in California, and the NAMM show, National Association of Music Merchants, is where all of the vendors, say Fender guitars and Marshall amplifiers and Korg keyboards and Gibson guitars and anybody that produces any musical instrument or any accoutrement that is associated with it, they have conventions twice a year. They'll have Summer NAMM in Nashville, at least it used to be there, and then a Winter NAMM in Anaheim down by Disneyland. And It was typically in late January, early February, and this particular year, Southern California was experiencing what's called an El Nino. And if you don't know what El Nino is, pragmatically speaking, for Southern California, it means a wet winter. So California can go through all these droughts, and then maybe a couple of times a decade, there'll be an El Nino, and we'll get floods, and we'll get snow in the mountains, and we'll get floods in the foothills. And when it rains for 10 days straight without stopping.
Damn.
So it may not rain for 9 or 10 months of the whole year. And then when it does not stop. And so all of the fires that you have in the fall and everything, they become mudslides during an El Nino. And I lived north of Los Angeles, just in the foothills where a lot of those fires would be. And so anyway, I'm packing up to go to the NAMM show for the weekend, usually a Thursday through Sunday type of situation. I got a buddy that's got a booth, and I had D'Acquisto guitar strings and Ibanez guitars and D'Andrea guitar picks and a couple other Lexicon, endorsers. So I had to go down there and do some FaceTime and meet some of the company reps. And back in the day, there'd be the groupies would show up on Saturday, and everybody would go to the Marriott bar, and it was like this huge, crazy party. So, I'm packing up. I got not bringing guitars because I'm not playing, but I'm bringing, leather pants, leather jacket. I wasn't wearing a hat back then. I had to bring sweats to go to the gym. I had to bring pictures for autographs and all this kind of stuff. I'm loading the car, and it's raining. It's pouring down rain. And it's early, though. And I'm like, I got to get on the road early because I'm an hour from LA, and Anaheim is another hour south of LA. So I know it's going to be slow. So anyway, jump in the car, I'm running, I'm doing a mental inventory. I got everything. Like, okay, I got this, I got that. I'm checking things off. And I get just north of LA, and I'm driving along the I-5 freeway, and traffic slows down. And I hit the brakes. My foot slips off the brake. I look down, and I'm wearing my slippers. I forgot my boots. And I'm like, crap. So I was so far from home. There's no way I was going to turn around and drive all the way home to get my boots. I'm almost at LA. So I said, oh, man, I'll go to Melrose. So it's like Thursday early afternoon, late morning Thursday. I'm going to Melrose. Not all the places are open. I'm like, oh man, I just need a pair of boots to fit. I just want black boots in my size, and I'm just, So I go to all the places I know. Nobody's got anything in my size, and then I go to one last place next to the old Aardvarks, and guys got boots in there, and then I see these flame boots, and I'm going, oh man. And they fit perfectly, but they were like, it was either $245 or $275. They were really expensive. And this was back in like 96 or something. Right. So that's expensive boot. They're a brand new boot, new company, new rocks. They're made in Spain, and they're hard to get. But Melrose had them. They're the only ones I could find in my size. So I bought them. I threw my slippers away. I wore them from the store. They got wet, on the way to the car. And then I drive down there, and I get on the convention floor. I check in. As soon as I walk in to the convention floor, these two girls go, "Love your boots, man." And that was the phrase for the weekend. Nice boots. So, and I still have them, and I still wear them. Now, they only come out a couple of times a year, but they're barely scuffed. Now, they weigh like 6 pounds a piece. So I'm Irish, I exaggerate. So maybe 4 pounds a piece, but 4 pounds on each foot, that's pretty heavy. And I wear them to play gigs, but the problem is the soles are so big and thick and wide that you hit a pedal board and inevitably you're going to hit two pedals at once.
Oh,
And I always have a mute switch on my pedal board. So I'm like, all of a sudden I'm turning myself off. As I go into a solo, I'm making this great solo phase and then nothing. And so it's sort of like, well, what do you do? I know David Lee Roth said, you know, rock and roll is all about the hair and the shoes, you know.
Yeah.
And so you suffer for your art. You know what I mean? So I'm wearing these big, heavy shoes. They hurt my feet. They look amazing. They get a lot of comments and a lot of attention. And then I added this black and orange flame shirt. So now they've matched the shirt, and the boots are matching now. But it's you know, tough to hit that pedal board. So, but you know what? Sometimes better to look cool and make a few more mistakes and not worry about it. I call that the visual entertainment aspect of the show.
Right.
Because if I got the hat on, I got the great shirt, and I got the great shoes, then all I have to do is get out of my own way and hold this cool guitar, and things will work out all right.
Absolutely, John, for sure. And with the stuff that you do with Ibanez now, but of course your BC Rich has got, you know, history and an image all of its own as well. How did that become, you know, like the John Christ guitar, you know, between having the little Danzig skull on there, of course, but you know, it's very much associated with you.
It's interesting. It's probably 1980. I got Guitar Player magazine, a prescription. You like that prescription? It was a drug, subscription for my birthday for Guitar Player magazine. And on the back cover, there was a tour picture backstage of Joe Perry leaning on his road cases with a red 10-string bitch. And that was it. That one shot, I had to have it. And so I started looking up other guitar magazines to see what kind of, it didn't say, right? It just said BC Rich. And then so I started looking around, and I got obsessed with this guitar. And I found a couple more ads, and there were like well-endowed women with these cool little gold necklaces that said BC Rich on it. And then you would just see just the top part of the guitar, just like a little wood grain thing. So it was very seductive advertising. And I was a teenager, of course, and I fell for it. And I said, someday I'm going to have one of those guitars. So I cut the back cover of the magazine off, and I took some stick pins and I stuck them into the wall above my pillow and looked at it every night. A couple of pictures, and on that wall, and then another wall, I had the Woodstock picture of Jimi Hendrix, you know, the 6-foot tall poster of him doing the Star Spangled Banner. And then I had some Van Halen, Ted Nugent, Black Sabbath posters in the bedroom, the basement bedroom. But that one BC Rich, you know, right there, I was something about it. I just had to have it. Found out Rick Derringer had one. He played Mockingbirds at the time. So that became the obsession with it. It took a few years before I finally got it. I ordered it. It took a year to get delivery. And it was $1,457.23. I still remember how much I paid for it. I have the receipt. And I have the initial deposit slip, and I have the actual receipt from the final payment. My mom put it all in a scrapbook for me, so I still have that. And I got it my senior year of high school in April, and I graduated in June, and I actually played it at my graduation ceremony. I have one picture somewhere of a cap and gown, and I got the BC Rich on. So that was like my pride and joy. And then it just felt right, you know. And I'd played Les Pauls and I played Fenders, and I never got the best Les Pauls, and I couldn't afford the best Fenders, but I had this one, and it was sort of my standard thing. even when I got into Danzig, Sam Hain, and then Danzig, I broke the neck on it. We were going out to open up for Slayer, and we didn't have road cases yet. And so I just put it in the hard shell case, and it went on the plane, and they threw it off the ramp and threw other stuff on top of it. Got to the hotel, the neck was snapped in half.
No.
So I had a backup Les Paul, but I didn't have the BC Rich. And Kerry King from Slayer graciously lent me one of his Mockingbirds to do the show. And it was amazing. It played so much better than my BC Rich did at the time. And it was just an amazing guitar. I offered him $5,000 on the spot. He refused. And every 10 years I offer him money, and every 10 years he refuses. So it's a thing. And while that guitar was being repaired, we went to Europe with Metallica, and I played Les Pauls, and early Danzig shows, you'll see me playing Les Pauls, and that was because the BC Rich was in California getting repaired, and they up there, and let's see, it was the High Desert. I can't remember the name of the town where the company was. It was like Little Rock or something like that on the way to the 15. But those guys enjoyed their herb, shall we say. And nothing got done in a hurry up there. But I did meet Bernie Rico, the owner of the company, and he thanked me for playing his BC Rich guitars. And he wanted to make me a special custom double neck. And then he passed away.
Oh, no.
And his son took over the company, ran it into the ground, sold it off to the Japanese. And then it's been back and forth and licensing things for 20 years after that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's why I never got endorsed by them, because Ernie was getting up there, and I think at the time it was just Slayer. I was playing one, Slayer were playing them, and I think Dave Mustaine had one, and
Lita Ford's been pretty associated.
Lita Ford was playing them. She was playing the next generation. She wasn't playing the bitches.
Oh, okay.
She was playing BC Riches, and she was playing, I can't remember the model she was playing, but
I think it's the Warlock model.
Yeah, that's right. She played the Warlocks, and then eventually Slash started playing them here and there. So that there were no endorsement deals with BC Rich at the time.
Gotcha.
They would give me discounts, and the other ones that I got, Rick Rubin bought one from Tracy Guns, and it was this horrible lime green color. It was just horrible. It was like a surf guitar, and so we painted it black and fixed it up, and that's the one I used almost exclusively on the Lucifuge record.
Oh,
and then I bought another one from, remember a group called Blue Cheer from the 60s?
Yeah.
Acid rock. So we were on tour, and we were up in, I want to say it was Portland, Oregon. And the old guitar player was working in a music store up there. And my guitar tech, I always sent him out. They had to get strings, and they had to get supplies and all this kind of stuff. And I said, just keep an eye out for one. And they found one, and they brought it to sound check for me. And I was like, yeah, go back and give them the rest of the money. And so those were the main three, that I had all those years.
Oh, that's cool, John.
And the third one I used for parts for the other two.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yep. So I scavenged parts off of the third one to keep the number one and number two going. And the number two guitar is in the Hard Rock, and I think it's in Tampa, Florida.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I mean, we put it in the Hard Rock here in Baltimore to debut it. And that was back in the late 90s, like 98, 97. And then it's been all over the place. I put some boots, with the Danzig skulls on it, and guitar case that Erie had done this huge, beautiful screen on, and that BC Rich. And man, I wish I had the pickups out of that guitar, boy.
Oh, man.
It had an amazing sound, but Yeah, so that was kind of the look, and it's so funny because after Danzig, I would jam with some other guys and some guys my age and a little bit older, and they would tease me about that guitar, and they go, you know, that guitar is so the '80s called. They want that guitar back, man. You know, you need to grow up and go for either a Les Paul or a Strat. So I went and bought a gigantic Gibson Birdland like Ted Nugent's, and I played that for a while because Uncle Ted was he was one of my first lead guitar inspirations.
Oh, very cool.
Because he was just insane. The first time, I heard a fellow student at my grade school played Cat Scratch Fever very badly, but that was the hit on the radio at the time. But some of my older sister's boyfriend said, no, you don't want to hear that. You need to hear Double Live Gonzo. And that was it. As soon as I heard that, I was like, oh my, they ruined me, you know. This was before he got all crazy political, you know. He's just a rock and roller. Bag him and tag him, Ted, you know.
Absolutely, for sure. Angel, I'm going to kick it back up to you in a little bit, man, right after this, because it looks like we've also got a couple of fan questions popping up. So we definitely want the fans to get their questions answered by John. But John, I also wanted to ask you real quick, was there a particular Danzig record, you know, of the ones that you did with him that you really were stoked on, that you felt like you guys were just firing on all cylinders? Did you feel like it was Lucifuge where you're, you know, 2 albums in? I happen to fancy, you know, How the Gods Kill quite a bit because I love Dirty Black Summer and Left Hand Black and When the Dying Calls. But is there a record that you did with the original lineup that you felt, man, we're just fucking killing it right now?
So, you know, I get this question from time to time. And as I'm listening to it, it's sort of a bittersweet, you know, because the first one is the first one.
Sure.
And there was so much anticipation. There was so much work. And then when it came out, it was good, but it didn't hit like we'd hoped. But it was good enough to get us on tour with Metallica. It was good enough to get us banned from MTV, you know. So it started our cult sort of status. And Rick Rubin was courting Slayer. He's trying to sign them. So we got to play with them. So we got access to those crazy fans. And the Slayer fans realized that we were as crazy as they were. We just didn't play as fast as Slayer, you know. But we were just as intense. So there are moments from each record cycle. If you're just asking on a purely sonic level, right?
Yeah.
The sounds of the first record, it was Rick Rubin was wrangling a herd of cats because he had Glenn Danzig, the voice of the Misfits, and then Eerie Von was with him, and then he had Chuck Biscuits, which was Black Flag DOA Circle Jerks, you know, Henry Rollins, just hardcore punk rock drummer. And then here I was, no reputation yet, kid from Baltimore, who said, okay, you know, you're the glue that's going to help make this whole thing. But I came from heavy metal background, hard rock background, and we met at the Blues, and that took the first record and touring cycle to get to Lucifuge. So the first record was us trying everything under the sun, trying to come up with the right intensity, the right chemistry, the right vibe, in a very strict, stripped down sound and format. And when Chuck Biscuits and I were roommates when it came out, and we heard it and we were so disappointed at the tones. We were like, oh my God, She Ride, the snare drum is distorted. And oh my God, that guitar is so dry. There's no reverb. There's no echo. Oh my God, he killed us. He ruined us. And we didn't know that he'd actually saved us and created this intense vibe out of, where you had Whitesnake and Aerosmith doing Permanent Vacation and all these glam bands with all these rich textures and this over processed sound. Now you got this stripped down guitar, bass, and drums, and this guy screaming like Jim Morrison in your face. M.I. Demon was just, for me, was like the high point of that whole thing. That intensity is where we all were. And almost every song on that first record, Glenn is screaming, either in between lines in a verse or all through a chorus, or either going into a chorus or coming out. And he's hitting these high notes. He's nailing B's. I mean, nobody hits high B's, and he's like crushing them. And I'd never heard anything like it before. So that was the whole uncertainty of getting that together. Then we moved to LA. Def Jam breaks up. Russell keeps Def Jam. Rick Rubin starts Def American. We go to Geffen Records. We all move to Hollywood. We start working on the second record, Lucifuge. And then he brings in the new engineer, Brendan O'Brien, who'd worked with the Georgia Satellites back in Atlanta and knew all the Black Crowes guys, and was a brilliant musician and slick engineer and a great guitar player. He was a better guitar player than I was, and I hated him. But he wanted me to succeed, so I was a sponge. I learned everything I could from him, and he talked to Rick. He got us some budget so we could order some extra equipment, and that record started with a BC Rich Dive Bomb, Long Way Back from Hell.
Mm-hmm.
What lead guitarist wouldn't want to start a record with a dive bomb and feedback, right?
Mm-hmm.
But leading up to that point, Glenn and Chuck and Erie and I had started getting more in tune with the blues. And that's, I remember saying, Glenn, what are you really looking for? And what do you really like? And Rick encouraged this, and he was like, I like the old blues. I like Howlin' Wolf. I like Willie Nixon, and so I started diving into this old blues stuff, old blues guys, Spoonful, Lightning Hopkins, all that kind of stuff, Muddy Waters. And so we started jamming, and, I'm the One popped out of that. And Killer Wolf, Tired of Being Alive. Devil's Plaything was just kind of, Glenn had that first initial lick. Da, 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 da. That's all we had. He called me on the phone, said, hey, listen to this. He had his Les Paul on. It wasn't plugged in. And I was Erie and I were living in the other end of Hollywood. And Glenn called up, and I was listening, and I had the long cable phone, there were no cell phones yet. And so I had this thing tucked under my shoulder. I'm like, let me get my guitar, and he's playing it and singing it to me. And I'm like, okay, I got it. All right, let me go record it on a cassette, and we started working, and that's how a lot of the songs, we would get an idea. I call him and say, hey, I got this other part for the song. What do you think? And he's like, okay, well, bring it to rehearsal, and we'll jam with it. And that's how we started writing all the songs. Sometimes he would just call me up and say, listen, I got a micro cassette recorder, and he would just be going, just screaming into it. And I'm like, oh, I think I know what you want. And I would turn it into riffs, and we'd get together and put it. But so Lucifuge was, once we got into the studio and we got all the arrangements for the songs that we liked, then Rick and Glenn just turned me loose on the guitar parts. So I was just Brendan and me all day and all night long while we got that. It took like a week, 10 days to get the drum tracks right. And once we got all Chuck stuffed, he was done. We didn't see him for months, And then I was in there working on the guitar stuff and got the basics done so that we could start tracking vocals. And then I would come back in, do backing vocals with Glenn, and then do overdubs and solos and then we'd start mixing. And Dave Bianco was there, Jim Scott, all these guys had worked with the Rolling Stones. You know, they've worked with Johnny Cash. They've been around. These were true veterans. So that experience, Hollywood Sound Recorders, was amazing. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I've met a lot of young guitarists now that say, man, that second record is like the perfect guitar record. And I'm like, I thought it was underdone. That, you know, there were no solos on it. Everything was so short. It did too much on the blues thing, and we didn't get, you know, heavy enough. But people were like, no, I love that record. Then we get to the third record, and that was kind of like my heavy metal guitar record.
Sure.
You know, and we started once, you know, after Lucifuge, I started tweaking the guitar sound a little bit more. Live on tour, we did more touring. And I started getting a little bit edgier with it. And then I bought a couple of new amplifiers and stuff. At the time, I found out that Jerry Cantrell and I were using the same VHT heads. And the serial number on his was like 100 numbers away from mine. He got his before me. And that was that Man in the Box sound. Gong, 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 right?
Mm-hmm.
So he was playing a Strat, but if you had a BC Rich there, they'd have, I think, you know, a similar chunk to it. I just pushed it a little bit harder. And then for that third record, it was just, you know, we were in a place that we wanted to play few more up-tempo songs, you know, because Lucifuge was slow.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it wasn't slow, but it was mid-tempo grooves.
Yeah.
We needed to have a few faster parts, but then when How the Gods Kill came out, it was sort of at rehearsal, it was slow and sweet, but then Glenn was like, I need this riff just to be squealing, you know, wailing, harmonics, dive bombs, feedback, blah, 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 blah. And I said, are you serious? You mean I can go? I can really go? And he's like, go for it. I was like, all right. You know, so when it kicks into that show me how the gods kill, bow, 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 you know, that was, we arrived at a different level, you know, so that song and Dirty Black Summer pretty much carried that record, even though the first single was Left Hand Black. So I don't know, you figure it out. They thought we wanted How the Gods Kill. We knew it was a great song, but our management and record company didn't want to release it as the single. So that changed things up, but Beavis and Butthead really liked it. You know, so we started getting some airplay. And that third record for me was, I was determined to preserve as much of the guitar sounds as I could. Now, I don't know if you guys are guitar players or ever recorded records with full bands before, but what happens is when you start with the basic tracks, bass guitar, drums, rhythm guitar, scratch vocals, right? You just got bare bones and a click track. That's your basic stuff. And then once you get your drums tracked, then you go back over your scratch tracks, typically bass first, then rhythm guitar. You have your lead vocal scratch that's on there for reference, and everything has to build around it. Well, you start layering guitars and you start putting different tones, and all of a sudden the guitars are getting bigger and bigger, and it's getting fat and heavy, and it's just like, oh, I'm in heaven. This is fucking great. And then vocals come in and overdubs, and they start putting effects and EQ and everything. And then the worst thing in the whole world happens. The guitar sound starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller. It's still heavy, it's still chunky, but it's getting squashed into a small area somewhere between the snare drum and the vocal. All that bass is gone. The lead vocal stole all my bottom. It stole the meat of the soul of my sound. Now is all lead vocals, and then the delay and compression that they put on the vocals, and that squashes it. And then the more stuff you put on it, the further and further back the guitars go. And I was like, and that happened on Lucifuge really bad. And I'm like, I'm not letting it happen on How the Gods Go. I just can't do it. And I think that was the beginning of like Glenn trying to take control from Rick Rubin in the studio, and Rick not being there, and me fighting back with Glenn, trying to preserve my takes while he's trying to get his vocals louder and louder and louder. And I'm trying to pull him down and bring the guitars back up and say, why don't we just go up and down and up and down? So everybody gets room to do this. No, we need the vocals up. And I'm looking at the engineer, and the engineer's just like, I need this gig, dude. Don't put me in the middle of it. I was like, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember we were mixing that record, and I think it was January 94. I thought the record came out before that, but somewhere in that we were in a mixing process. It could have been that record or the next one, but the Northridge earthquake happened, right?
Yep, I remember that one.
And it shut everything down. You know, the highway overpasses were damaged all over, 100 square miles. There were roads that were damaged and freeway overpasses that collapsed. The one big one, I don't know if you remember the footage of seeing there was a truck up there, and there was a cop car, and then it broke in the front and the back, and people were stranded up there, and the motorcycle cop drove off one edge of the bridge. That was 5 miles from my house. So that was my main highway to get to Hollywood. Right. So only the truck lanes were open because they went along the floor of the canyon. So we had 2 lanes in each direction to go 35 miles. And it was unbelievable. I mean, there was the loss of life in Northridge. It was like 57 people, something like that. A lot of people crushed in apartments when the park, it was horrible. There were fires. There was all kinds of stuff going on. And of course, for me, my condo was thrashed. I had to move out. The windows were all busted out of it. Everything in the kitchen got pushed out of the cabinets. The refrigerator walked across the floor. All the windows were blown out. The deadbolt in my front door snapped off. The door was swinging wide open at 4:30 in the morning. And it was like, what the hell just happened, So everybody was kind of in shock for a while of that, and it slowed down the mixing process, but we still kept working on it. I mentioned that story because around that time, right before that time, I just met Lemmy from Motorhead, and we were going to do, Rudy Sarzo called me, who played with Ozzy. And he was doing a Randy Rhoads benefit. He and Randy's mom had this yearly benefit at the Palace Theater. So they put all these different musicians together. So Rudy put me together with Lemmy. And we were going to do some old Little Richard songs and stuff. He was obsessed with Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis and all this kind of stuff. So I went over to the Kill Shack, and I saw all his Nazi memorabilia and all the kind of stuff. And he had these bell-bottom jeans with these snakeskin boots, and the hat and his whole outfit. And we were just getting ready to rehearse, and the Northridge earthquake happened, canceled everything.
Oh.
And so I never got to play with him, but that was around that time. So that third record opened up a lot of doors for us. We toured with Black Sabbath on that tour for a couple of weeks, and we toured. Who else did we have with us? I think maybe, I can't remember if Soundgarden was for the second record or the third record. I can't remember the sequence, but we had COC, Soundgarden, Danzig, and that was a great tour. The fourth record, things were, like I said, I talked to Ozzy.
Yeah.
And that was my least favorite. But the further I get away from it, the more I realized that we had some great engineers, and Rick Rubin and production. There's a lot of great production value on it. And the drums are amazing. And so they saved so much of it in the studio after the fact. But I mean, Glenn and I weren't even really even on speaking terms for that whole album.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And, we just started touring, and then Chuck left, and it was, that last US tour with Metallica, where it hit the fan. We almost broke up that summer while we were on tour with Metallica. I mean, it was that close to happening then. The record was just finished, and we were touring. So it was sort of, that was a tumultuous time. But now I'm starting to enjoy it. The more people that I meet that really enjoyed that record. Hang on for 1 second.
Sure.
Is it dinner time yet? Okay, I'm being called for dinner.
Nah, no problem. We've
A
definitely
couple of questions, just a couple of fan questions, and then I gotta go.
No, totally cool. Angel, go ahead and take it away. You heard it right up there, fans. We're going to hit some fan questions. It is last call for alcohol. We're going to let John get on with his evening. He's been very, very gracious, and we appreciate his time, so we want to honor his wishes. Go ahead, Angel.
Okay. Brian, you Unleashed on 3. You were doing the work of 3 guitarists on a single one.
I appreciate that. And that album required a complete redesign of my guitar rig. And it didn't start out that way, but once we got into the studio, like How the Gods Kill goes from very clean, quiet sound to this incredible high gain. So you go from, 0 to 60 in one switch. In the studio, you can do that, but live, I didn't have the equipment. So I had to get a rig built by this famous guy, Bob Bradshaw, who used to do rigs for his best friend, Steve Lukather of Toto, and every other studio guitarist, Michael Landau, all these famous guys. And so that album, we decided, okay, we're going to double and triple track some guitars to get a fat sound, real heavy. And the heavier the guitar sound, the more distortion on it, the thinner it tends to get. So by triple quad tracking with different tones, you can thicken it up and still keep that edge. So even from the very first record, we were like, okay, so I'm one guitarist. When we go on tour, we're not hiring a rhythm guitar player. How are we going to do this? And so as we were recording, I was figuring out how I can play rhythm and lead at the same time. And the trade-off was like the second lead in Mother at the very end, even though it was the first record, live, instead of coming in with the screaming vocals at the end of the last chorus and doing the lead at the end, I would start with the rhythm part, do dun 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 dun, and then I would start the lead on the second part of the rotation, and then the third rotation I'd start the rhythm, jump to lead, so I'd alternate back and forth. And I'm like, this is crazy. So for each successive record, I tried to change up some of the chord progressions in the beginning, knowing that I'm going to have to do a solo over a slightly empty section. So how can I keep it sounding full with just one guitar player going? And so we didn't want the overdub rhythm tracks to overshadow the main riff. So one riff always had to take priority over the harmony riffs that were there to thicken it up in the background. And then as I was recording them, I was working on ways so that I could play the main riff with a harmony with one of my other fingers. So I'm picking and plucking and doing weird stuff. And what I realized was, hey, I can do this, but one guitar into one Marshall amp, it ain't going to cut it. So I'm going to have multiple amps, and I'm going to have to use delays and special effects, and then figure out a way to play it so that when I go to a solo and then back to the rhythm, the audience is still hearing what they're used to hear on the records, right? Because I wanted the band to sound better live than it did on the record. I didn't want it to be the opposite. And didn't want to do the Milli Vanilli thing. So thank you for that compliment. And I've always tried to, and the funny thing is when I did some shows recently with some rock and roll bands and I had a rhythm guitar player, I had to completely rethink the way I played everything, because for the last 30 years, I'd been playing it the way I've been doing it on tour, which is different than each separate part is on the record. So it's been a constant experimentation, just trying to get the right sounds to where it sounds fresh, but it also sounds cool and it also sounds creative, but never thin.
On Dancing One, what songs did you write the rips or scratch for?
So going in, we had, let me see if I can remember. There was a rough lick for Twist of Cain. There were just 3 chords for Mother, but it was punk rock. Am I Demon we did together. Mother was a combination of everybody. So Glenn had started it with punk rock, but it didn't have a chorus, it didn't have bridges or anything like that. So through many pre-production rehearsals with Rick Rubin, George Draculius, Glenn, Chuck, and I, we came to this compromise. Rick had been working with the Cult. They were doing kind of an AC/DC thing. He said, let's slow it down. Let's make it a little bluesy. Let's put some bent notes in it. And it worked for Mother. So when we got to She Rides, I'll never forget, we were in a rehearsal studio and we had a basic verse part, but the riff just wasn't coming. And Rick stood there while I was like a human guitar jukebox, trying all these variations, trying to get that. And then the pre-chorus down. So there were a lot of opinions that were thrown around. And so what I did was, as people were suggesting things, I just would loop each section and I would keep modifying it, bend a note slightly differently, try a couple of different notes, segue back to a pre-chorus, to a verse, to a chorus, whatever. And then they would get a chance to listen to it. Oh, I like that. Oh, I like that. Oh, I like that. And then we'd start to piece it together. And then when we get something that's workable, then Erie and Chuck would come in and we would start to jam it. And then boom, they would fire up the old Casio dual cassette recorder in the studio. And we would record a couple of takes of it. We all go home and work on it. What else? Let's see. End of Time, Soul on Fire. Started out with the piano part. Twist of Cain, again, there was no bending in it. It was just straight punk rock. So I completely twisted that lick around, slowed it down, and we brought in that D sharp or E flat for the. So there were parts that I remember stumbling across, like the bridge in Twist of Cain Down, 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 oh, gotta blow, right? There are endings of songs. So my thing, I became kind of like the band director. So I would communicate stuff to Chuck and Erie, and then we would start looping it. And then I would call out like play by play, calling as we're going through it and making changes to the stuff. And Rick and Glenn would be sitting there, and then Glenn would come up and he would just start screaming or vocalizing. He didn't have any words for anything yet. And we would just kind of jam it out that way. Occasionally, Glenn would be like, I got an idea. Let me see your guitar. And he would sit down and he would bang something out. And I'll go, oh, I know what you want. Because, it'd be rudimentary, but I'd say, okay, I got it. And Glenn had an amazing sense of timing. So I would be playing something straight and he'd be like, no, it's got to be offbeat. It's got to be, let's syncopate it. So he had a really good clock because he played drums. And I was like, all right. And then we would kind of glue stuff together that way. I hope that answers your question.
Yep. Like the most about being a musician?
Well, what do I like most about being a musician? That's changed. The answer has changed many times over the years. When I was a teenager, it was the thrill of learning my favorite songs and then practicing really hard to accomplish them and then performing them. And people are like, man, that's great. You're getting so much better. You're getting so the act of getting better. And then when you go out with the band and you start to play and then people like it, because you don't know if people are going to like it or not. Some bands I play with, people didn't like it at all. And it was like, that's my mom in the back clapping. Nobody else is clapping. And then with Danzig, when we first started playing, even our very first show, Erie and Glenn's fans from the Misfits and some of Chuck's fans were there. And then a bunch of my friends and family, I was in college at the time, all my roommates, dorm mates, and everybody came up. They drove up from Baltimore. There were like 20 of them up there. And they didn't know much about punk rock or anything. They were just straight rock and rollers. And I'm looking down from the stage and I'm seeing friends of mine and girlfriends, and they're all they're mosh pit and there's crowd surfing. And it was insane. And at that point, it was realizing that I was part of a band that was doing something new, and it was intense and it was powerful. And it was such a thrill to watch the fans lose their shit while we're playing on stage. And then the next level is touring, and the chicks each level up. The women get better and better looking. But then you get to a certain point where once you've had a 10, there's no 11. And then you start to realize that if you've had a 10, all the other bands that were in there before you have had that same 10. So you start talking to your roadies and you're going, you know what? I think I need to go to the doctor and get a prescription. And by the way, wasn't Anthrax through here about a month ago? Maybe somebody should call those guys up if they haven't been to the doctor yet and tell them, did they meet Betty? So that's a different level when you realize that via DNA, you're related to all your rock and roll brothers, right? Because the girls, they don't travel. They're in their hometown, and the hottest ones don't pay for anything. They just show up looking great. And all they got to do is make friends with the crew and then the band. But it's a thrill for everybody involved at that point. And then you get to a point where you realize, okay, got a couple of records under my belt. Are we going to make it big, or are we done? And then you go, wow, you know what? Can we get on tour with Black Sabbath? Tony Iommi's my hero. We have the same birthday. We're both left-handed. Do you think I'll get a chance to meet him? And then it happens, and you're like, oh my God. And it's like, I want to meet Ozzy. And then you interview him, you meet Ozzy, and then all of a sudden my childhood dreams are coming true. And that's what then the greatest part was. I got to meet all my heroes.
Yeah.
I got to ask them the questions that I always wanted to know when I was 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. And it was incredible. I'll never forget when I met Robert Plant. We were playing a festival in Germany and he was in catering. And it was like all of a sudden he was there and I'm like 2 feet away from him. And I'm like, oh my God, I got dry mouth. What the hell am I going to say to this guy? You know, so that type of access, when you get to a certain level of success, you reach a higher level of access that no one else gets unless they've achieved at least that same level. Now, looking back, if you say, well, those first 4 records were the peak, and then we had Mother 93 because of Beavis and Butthead, and then most of the people that I knew have retired or died, and a lot of us in the trenches are geezing now, you know, we're just trying to hang on. Like when I talked to Alice Cooper, he's like, hey, you know, Ozzy was a lifer, I'm a lifer. It's just I got to do it. It's in my blood. It's who I am. It's what I do. I'm not feeling that I have to be on tour, but I have to be playing. And the fact that I don't dig ditches, that I don't drive a trash truck. I drove a truck for a while. The fact that I don't have to drive a truck anymore, it almost killed me.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that music has been such an integral part of my life, and I realized the magic of it, that I can be in any airport on the planet. You know, I could be in Kenya, Africa, Mogadishu, Moscow, someplace where I don't speak the language 1 syllable, and somebody's got a guitar, and I motion, can I see that? And I start playing it, and then they'll say, give it back, and they start playing it. I can communicate with music, and we can get to know each other without speaking a word, right? And musicians, we don't see black, white, yellow, brown. We just see musicians, right? There's no racial component that means shit when it comes to the love of music and the magic of what it can do and what it does. And it's changed my life. And just as a teacher in some small way, I just try, I don't teach anybody anything. I just try and steer them in a direction where they can figure stuff out for themselves. And then when I see them getting involved and playing in music and recording albums and going on tour, I get a vicarious kick out of it. You know, and then when somebody says, you're the reason I picked up guitar 30 years ago, it's like, who gets that? Who gets somebody to say that to you? Your band changed my life, or your band saved my life. I was going through a divorce. I heard Blood and Tears, and it just spoke to me. So it's bigger than me. I'm just a part of it. I was happy that I worked hard enough to be at a level where my craft was sharp enough so that I could do the work, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm still here after all this time and people still want to hear my opinion and my silly stories about my flame boots, it's all good.
Yeah, I actually wish they had 6 more hours with you.
There you go.
Yeah. Well,
we could do it again. What I'd like to know is, you know, any of the people, the questions that I didn't get to answer, please fire your questions at Jay, and we will answer them for you.
Absolutely. Send them in.
Send them in.
I'll collect them. We'll send them to John. We'll get them.
Actually, anybody that's ever, seen the original lineup, or any of the other stuff I've done, or just even simple stuff like how rock and roll has impacted your life, or someone you care about in your world, that stuff lights me up. I never get tired of hearing that. And I never get tired of hearing how good I was.
You're still fantastic, John. I can speak from experience watching you right up to this day.
Well, I don't move around as fast. The doctors say, your head banging days are long gone. But I'm back in the gym. I'm pounding the iron again. I'm getting back into good shape. And because I want to go out and meet as many of you as I can, talk music, do some jamming, have a meal, throw back a beer, talk about how bad the Baltimore Ravens are, whatever it is.
No, absolutely. And John, just a fun final question. We appreciate you being part of course, our Halloween season. Do you have a favorite horror movie or Halloween movies that are kind of part of your October every year?
The original Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis, it's such a classic. But then after doing Mad Monster and fanboying out on Nev Campbell, the screen moved up.
The screen moved up.
And what
did you ever watch her in The Craft?
So I got to meet Matthew Lillard.
Oh man.
And he was a star of that show. And he came up to me and I made this horrible faux pas. He goes, "Hey man, I just wanted to tell you." He goes, "I'm a fan," but he goes, "My best man was like the biggest Danzig fan on earth." And I said, "Well, I'd like to meet him sometime." And he goes, "Sadly, he passed away." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know, but I felt horrible." And I said, "Man, I really would love to meet him." And we hugged it out and it was cool, so, and doing those horror cons, there's some great people just for the history of it. Now it's been so long, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre guys.
Yeah.
I did a con in Salem, Massachusetts. Leatherface was there and these original guys. So, definitely the original Halloween and the music. The Exorcist movie. So in the fall, whenever my intro music is always horror movie soundtracks. And then when I go into the intro of like Twisted Cane or what are these long guitar intros, I'll put a couple of seconds of horror movie music in it.
Nice.
Just long enough for the fans to recognize it. It takes a couple of seconds because they're not hearing it on guitar. And then when they start to pick it up, I'm like, yeah. And they're like, "Ugh," and then I'll play a different one. So now it's a quiz. I'm doing a musical quiz. Can they figure out what horror movie I'm doing? So,
that's awesome, man.
That's what I do for fun now. I don't get out much. I'm just saying.
Hey, that's all right. Chuck, who's watching us on YouTube, mentioned the movie Maximum Overdrive, which is a movie that I love and a whole soundtrack put together by AC/DC.
That's awesome.
But John, thank you so much. We don't want to hold you up from dinner any longer.
Right,
we
guys.
really, really appreciate your time. Make sure that Metal Summoners send us those questions. We'll get them to John. We'll make sure that everything gets answered for you. And we really, really appreciate you guys.
Yep.
John,
and also you can tell them, they can go to my Instagram, The John Christ, send me a DM, follow me. I'll follow you back. Also johnchrist.com. You can email me there. info@johnchrist.com. I got guys that'll, say you watch the interview or you have a special question. It'll get to me. I get all that stuff. The more detail, like I said, if you've ever met me or you want to meet me or you want a guitar lesson, I'm not cheap, but I am the best. We can hook you up. I'm also on Cameo if you want a birthday wish where I'm playing Danzig riffs for your loved one's birthday, boyfriend, girlfriend, wife. you're married, but you still have a girlfriend. I mean, I can hook all these people up. And if you just want to bust somebody's chops, then you go on Cameo, you send me their horrible nicknames. I will roast them to pieces. If you've got somebody that needs a pick-me-up, or you just want to wish congratulations to somebody that finally got a job and graduated, I can take care of all that good stuff.
Nice. That's awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much, John. We really, really appreciate your time this evening. We can't wait to do it again for sure.
And also ask your fans what would they like to see me do?
Yeah.
They want me to come out with the Apostles. I know they're all going to say, I want you to get back to Danzig. But I said, listen, I've wanted that for 30 years. Every reunion tour, my phone number rings. I'm just saying. My phone number's on the internet. Now, don't call me. No. So, yeah, just let me know. And I have been in touch with Chuck Biscuits. He's alive and well.
Awesome. So awesome for sure.
All right, Jake.
Nope.
Counting down. 10.
Yep, you got
9.
it. Metal Summoners, thank you guys so much. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you're following John on all of his socials, and you can also reach out to him, just like he said in his messages, his email, as well as reach out to him on Cameo for everything that he's doing. Please follow the Metal Summit on Facebook and YouTube. That's where you guys are watching the interviews. That's where they always are. If you like knowing what we do, check us out. Make sure you're following us on Instagram, because that's where all the guest announcements come out first. You can follow Angel at Angel Alamo 78 on Instagram. You can also find
Angel Alamo.
And you can also find him on Facebook as well. Our beloved Psycho Steve, who works behind the scenes. You can follow him at psychostevepresents.com or The Real Psycho Steve on Instagram.
Shout out to Steve.
Absolutely. And I can be found on Instagram at salem.vampire. And you can also find me under that moniker on Facebook as well. We appreciate you guys so much. On behalf of the Metal Summit, for myself, Angel, and Steve, we are ever so honored and pleased that we had John Christ on the show. And we can't wait to have him again. Thank you so much, John. Take care. Be good. Metal Summoners guest announcement over the weekend for next week's episode. Make sure
Happy
that
Halloween, everybody. Thanks
Happy
for having
Halloween.
me.
Our pleasure. Take care. Be good. We'll see you guys next week for a brand new Metal Summit. Take care. Be good. And as always, you've been watching the Metal Summit.